settle into the sleepy mind channel. Tonight, we will explore one of the quietest and most remarkable processes happening inside the human body every moment of every day. Deep inside the brain, billions of tiny living cells communicate continuously through vast networks of electrical and chemical signals. Thoughts, memories, emotions, movement, learning, habits, and even personality emerge from these silent exchanges taking place inside a soft 3-pound organ resting quietly within the skull. Most people rarely stop to consider that the brain you fall asleep with tonight is not exactly the same brain you woke up with this morning. Tiny changes occur continuously beneath awareness as experiences reshape connections inside the mind itself. If you enjoy videos like these, feel free to like and subscribe, and check out the playlist for all-night listening with many more calm sleep stories and relaxing science explorations designed to help you rest while learning. Tonight's journey moves slowly through the hidden world of neuroplasticity, the process through which the brain strengthens, adjusts, reorganizes, and refines itself over time through experience, repetition, rest, and sleep. The human brain is made up of billions of specialized cells called neurons. These cells form the foundation of the nervous system and operate together in large networks spread throughout the brain and body. Each neuron is alive in a very active sense. It receives information, processes signals, and communicates with other neurons continuously through tiny exchanges occurring at great speed. Although a single neuron is microscopic, the combined activity of billions of them working together allows the brain to perceive the world, form memories, control movement, recognize faces, understand language, and create thoughts. Imagine standing high above a large city at night while millions of lights glow across roads, buildings, bridges, and neighborhoods stretching into the distance. Cars move constantly through streets, while information flows through invisible systems connecting one place to another. The brain operates in a similar way, although on a far more complex level. Instead of roads and buildings, the brain contains branching cells connected through vast communication pathways. Signals travel continuously across these living networks, while different regions exchange information with remarkable coordination. Neurons themselves have unusual shapes designed specifically for communication. Many contain long branching extensions that allow signals to travel between cells across surprisingly large distances relative to their tiny size. Some neurons connect with thousands of others simultaneously, forming enormous communication systems layered densely throughout the brain. Inside the cerebral cortex alone, countless exchanges occur every second without conscious awareness. What makes these cells especially fascinating is not simply their existence, but the way they interact together. A single neuron alone cannot produce thought or memory any more than a single water droplet can create an ocean wave. The true complexity emerges from communication between neurons operating collectively across large networks. The brain functions less like a single machine carrying out one task at a time, and more like a living ecosystem filled with constantly shifting activity. Neurons communicate through specialized connection points called synapses. These synapses are tiny gaps separating one neuron from another. Signals do not physically jump through direct contact in most cases. Instead, communication occurs through carefully regulated chemical exchanges traveling across microscopic spaces between cells. When one neuron becomes active enough, It releases chemical messengers that influence neighboring neurons and help continue the signal through the network. This process happens continuously and at incredible scale. At any given moment, many neurons are exchanging signals throughout the brain. Even while resting quietly in bed with closed eyes, neural communication remains active. Regions involved in memory, emotion, sensory processing, and internal regulation continue operating beneath awareness. The sleeping brain is not inactive. In many ways, it remains deeply occupied, organizing and regulating countless ongoing processes. Signals traveling between neurons create patterns of activity that form networks throughout the brain. Some networks help process visual information, while others support movement, language, memory, attention, emotional regulation, or sensory awareness. These systems do not remain entirely isolated from one another. They communicate continuously through overlapping patterns of activity, allowing the brain to combine information from many sources into coherent experience. For example, consider how effortlessly the brain recognizes a familiar face. Light first enters the eyes before signals travel into visual regions of the brain. Other areas compare incoming information with stored memories, while emotional systems attach feelings of familiarity or recognition. Language regions may retrieve the person's name, while additional networks influence social behavior and response. What feels like one simple moment actually involves enormous coordination between many neural systems operating together. One of the most important ideas in neuroscience is that communication itself shapes the brain over time. The brain is not fixed in the rigid way people once believed many generations ago. Earlier scientific thinking often described the adult brain as relatively permanent after development finished. Modern research revealed something far more dynamic. Neural connections can strengthen, weaken, reorganize, and adapt continuously throughout life in response to activity and experience. This ability to change begins with communication between neurons themselves. When certain pathways become active repeatedly, the brain may gradually strengthen those connections. Signals traveling across frequently used routes can become more efficient over time. Other pathways receiving little activity may weaken gradually instead. The brain constantly adjusts itself according to patterns of use, somewhat like a forest trail, becoming clearer through repeated travel, while unused paths slowly fade beneath leaves and growth. Even very ordinary daily experiences influence these systems. Learning a new skill, practicing an instrument, speaking a language, reading regularly, navigating familiar places, or repeating habits can all affect neural communication patterns gradually over time. The brain responds continuously to input from the environment and from repeated behavior. Every experience leaves some small influence upon activity within these networks. Modern neuroscience revealed that change itself is one of the brain's defining features. Neural communication forms the foundation for adaptation, learning, and memory across the lifespan. The vast networks inside the brain operate through constant interaction between billions of cells exchanging signals continuously every second. From these quiet, microscopic exchanges emerge thoughts, emotions, identity, and experience itself. Inside the human brain, communication between neurons does not occur randomly. Signals move through organized patterns that form vast interconnected networks spread across many different regions. These networks allow the brain to combine sensation, memory, emotion, movement, language, attention, and thought into unified experience. Every memory recalled, every familiar face recognized, and every skill practiced depends upon activity traveling through these living systems continuously beneath awareness. A useful way to imagine these networks is to think about pathways crossing through a large forest. At first, movement through untouched wilderness may feel slow and uncertain because no clear trail exists. But if people walk the same route repeatedly over long periods, the ground gradually changes. Plants bend, soil becomes compacted, and a visible trail slowly appears through repeated use. Eventually, the path becomes easier to follow because movement has shaped the environment itself. Neural networks behave in a similar way. Repeated activity can strengthen certain communication pathways over time, making signals travel more efficiently along familiar routes. The brain contains countless networks operating simultaneously every moment of the day. Some are involved in movement and balance, while others process sound, language, visual information, emotional response, memory formation, or internal regulation. These systems overlap constantly, exchanging information through complex patterns of communication that remain active even during quiet rest. One reason the brain feels so mysterious is because no single neuron contains a complete thought or memory by itself. Instead, memories emerge from patterns of activity spread across large groups of connected neurons working together. A memory is not stored in one tiny isolated location, like a single object placed inside a drawer. It exists more like a coordinated pattern distributed across networks communicating together. Consider something simple such as remembering the smell of rain on warm pavement during summer. That memory may involve sensory regions processing smell, emotional systems attaching feeling, visual regions, recalling images, and memory networks connecting those experiences together. When the memory returns, the brain partially recreates patterns of neural activity linked to the original experience. Large groups of neurons communicate together to rebuild the sensation internally. This network-based organization allows the brain to remain flexible and adaptive. Because memories and learned behaviors depend upon distributed patterns rather than fixed, isolated locations, the brain can continuously adjust connections in response to new experiences. Neural systems are dynamic rather than rigid. They reorganize gradually over time through repeated activity and changing input from the environment. Thinking itself depends upon coordinated communication across these networks. Even simple actions require enormous collaboration between many regions operating together. Reading a sentence, for example, involves visual processing, language recognition, memory retrieval, attention systems, and interpretation occurring almost instantly. The brain performs these operations so smoothly that people rarely notice the incredible amount of coordination involved. Inside these networks, signals travel along pathways formed through repeated communication between neurons. Some pathways become highly efficient because they are used frequently. Others remain weaker or less organized if activity occurs less often. The brain constantly adjusts itself according to patterns of use, reinforcing certain systems while allowing others to fade gradually into the background. This process helps explain why repetition plays such an important role in learning. Practicing a skill repeatedly encourages signals to travel through the same neural routes again and again. Over time, those pathways can become more stable and efficient. Activities that once required intense concentration may eventually feel automatic because the brain refined communication along those networks through repeated use. Learning to ride a bicycle offers a useful example. During early attempts, movement may feel awkward and uncertain, while balance requires intense focus. Many different systems struggle to coordinate efficiently, but after repeated practice, neural pathways involved in balance, movement, and coordination strengthen gradually. The activity becomes smoother and more automatic because the brain adapted itself through repetition. The same principle applies to language, music, reading, memory, sports, and many ordinary daily habits. Repeated activity influences neural communication patterns over time. The brain physically responds to experience by adjusting how networks operate together. What makes this especially fascinating is that the brain continues changing throughout life. Earlier scientific beliefs often assumed that adult neural systems remained largely fixed after development finished during youth. Modern neuroscience revealed a far more dynamic picture. Neural connections remain responsive to activity, learning, repetition, and experience across the lifespan. This adaptability allows people to learn new skills even later in life. New experiences can still influence communication patterns between neurons, while repeated practice continues shaping networks gradually over time. Although change may occur differently across different ages and conditions, the brain retains an ongoing ability to adapt itself through activity and experience. Neural networks also help explain why emotions and memories often become connected so strongly. Experiences involving strong emotional response may activate multiple systems simultaneously, encouraging more stable network formation. This is partly why emotionally important memories sometimes feel vivid and lasting, compared with ordinary experiences that fade more quickly. At the same time, not every signal or memory receives equal reinforcement. The brain constantly filters information, strengthening some patterns while allowing others to weaken. This balance helps prevent overwhelming amounts of information from remaining equally active all the time. Neural systems remain dynamic, partly because selective reinforcement shapes which pathways become most efficient. Sleep plays an important role in these processes as well. During rest, the brain continues processing patterns of activity formed throughout the day. Some connections may strengthen while others weaken gradually. Experiences can become reorganized and integrated into larger networks during periods of sleep and recovery. Even while lying quietly with closed eyes, neural systems continue communicating throughout the brain. Signals move through pathways shaped by memory, learning, emotion, sensation, and repeated experience. The sleeping brain remains active in ways most people never consciously notice. Modern neuroscience continues revealing how deeply connected human experience is to these evolving networks. Thoughts, habits, emotions, memories, and learned behaviors all emerge from patterns of communication, changing gradually over time. The brain is not a static machine built once and left unchanged forever. It is a living system continuously adjusting itself through activity and experience. For much of human history, the brain was often imagined as something relatively fixed after childhood development finished. Many earlier scientific ideas suggested that once neural systems formed during youth, the the structure of the adult brain changed very little afterward. Learning was understood more as filling a container with information rather than physically reshaping living networks inside the mind itself. Modern neuroscience revealed something more fascinating. The brain remains capable of change throughout life, continuously adjusting its connections and communication patterns in response to experience, repetition, activity, environment, and rest. This remarkable ability is known as neuroplasticity. The term refers to the brain's capacity to adapt its structure and function over time through changing neural connections. The word itself combines ideas related to the nervous system and flexibility. Unlike rigid materials that hold one fixed shape permanently, the brain behaves more like a living network capable of gradual adjustment and reorganization. Neuroplasticity does not mean the brain changes instantly or magically. Most neural adaptation occurs slowly through repeated activity and ongoing experience. Tiny adjustments accumulate over time as communication patterns strengthen, weaken, reorganize, or become more efficient. These changes often unfold quietly beneath awareness, while daily life continues normally on the surface. A useful comparison might be the way flowing water gradually shapes a landscape over many years. A single rainfall may leave little visible change, yet repeated movement of water slowly carves channels through earth and stone. Rivers deepen, while pathways form naturally according to repeated flow. In a similar way, repeated patterns of neural activity can gradually shape communication pathways inside the brain itself. This adaptability allows the brain to respond continuously to experience. Learning a language, practicing movement, forming habits, developing emotional responses, studying information, navigating environments, or repeating behaviors all influence neural communication patterns over time. The brain adjusts itself according to how it is used. One reason this discovery transformed neuroscience so dramatically is because it changed how scientists understood learning and memory. Earlier models sometimes treated the brain more like a static machine with fixed capabilities. Neuroplasticity revealed that experience itself influences physical organization within neural networks. Thoughts and behaviors are connected not only to temporary activity, but also to ongoing structural adaptation. Imagine a musician practicing the same piece of music every evening across many months. During early practice sessions, movements may feel uncertain, while concentration demands significant effort. Signals traveling through motor, sensory, auditory, and memory networks may initially operate less efficiently. But through repeated practice, those pathways gradually strengthen and coordinate more smoothly. The activity begins feeling more natural because the brain adapted itself through repetition and use. The same principle applies across many ordinary experiences. Reading regularly can influence language-related networks, while repeated movement shapes coordination systems. Emotional habits, patterns of attention, environmental stimulation, and even routines influence neural activity over time. The brain responds continuously to input from both the outer environment and internal mental patterns. This responsiveness is one reason environments matter so much during development and throughout life. Experiences provide the activity that shapes neural communication pathways gradually over time. Rich sensory input, movement, learning, social interaction, and repeated practice all contribute to how networks organize themselves. At the same time, Neuroplasticity also helps explain why habits can become deeply ingrained. Repeated thoughts and behaviors encourage repeated activation of certain pathways. Over long periods, these systems may become increasingly efficient and automatic because communication travels more easily along familiar routes. Habits often feel natural, not because they were permanently built into the brain from birth, but because repetition strengthened those patterns gradually through use. Neuroplasticity also helps support recovery and adaptation after injury in some situations. When certain pathways become damaged, the brain may sometimes reorganize activity through alternate networks or strengthen different communication routes gradually over time. This process varies greatly depending upon circumstances, yet it demonstrates how flexible neural systems can be under the right conditions. The adaptability of the brain does not mean all change occurs equally or effortlessly. Some forms of learning require enormous repetition and patience, while others happen more quickly, depending upon age, attention, emotion, sleep, environment, and biological factors. Neural systems operate according to physical and chemical processes shaped by many influences simultaneously. Sleep plays a particularly important role in supporting these changes. During sleep, the brain continues processing activity patterns formed during waking experience. Some connections may strengthen, while others weaken gradually. Neural systems remain active even during deep rest, quietly organizing information and adjusting communication pathways beneath awareness. Modern imaging technology allowed scientists to observe many of these changes more directly than earlier generations could imagine. Researchers discovered that repeated activity influences neural communication patterns in measurable ways. Regions involved in practice skills may behave differently over time, while networks adapt according to use and repetition. Even simple everyday examples reveal this adaptability. Consider how familiar routes through a neighborhood eventually require almost no conscious effort to navigate. At first, finding directions may demand close attention and active memory. Later, movement becomes more automatic because repeated experience strengthened communication patterns associated with navigation and spatial awareness. The brain's ability to adapt continuously also helps explain why people remain capable of learning throughout life. New experiences continue influencing neural systems, while repeated practice shapes pathways gradually over time. The living structure of the brain remains dynamic rather than permanently frozen. Neuroplasticity ultimately reflects one of the brain's most important characteristics. The nervous system is not designed merely to store information rigidly like an unmoving archive. It is designed to adapt continuously within a changing environment. Learning, memory, habit, skill, emotion, and experience all influence this living network over time. One of the most remarkable discoveries in modern neuroscience is that activity itself helps shape the physical organization of the brain over time. The brain is not simply a passive organ observing experience from a distance. It responds actively to patterns of use. Signals traveling repeatedly through certain pathways can gradually influence how networks operate, strengthen communication, and refine connections between neurons. In many ways, the brain becomes shaped by the activity moving through it each day. This process unfolds constantly and often quietly beneath awareness. Every thought repeated regularly, every skill practiced patiently, Every movement performed again and again, and every environment experienced consistently can influence neural systems over time. Tiny adjustments accumulate gradually within the brain as patterns of communication strengthen or weaken according to use. Imagine walking through fresh snow across an open field. The first journey leaves only a faint trail behind, but if the same route is traveled repeatedly, the pathway becomes easier to recognize. Snow compresses while the trail grows clearer and more stable. Movement itself shapes the path. Neural activity behaves in a similar way. Repeated communication along certain routes can gradually strengthen those pathways, allowing signals to travel more efficiently over time. This does not happen because the brain consciously decides which pathways should change. Biological processes operating continuously beneath awareness guide these adjustments automatically. Neurons responding together repeatedly may gradually strengthen communication between one another. Networks adapt according to patterns of activity occurring throughout daily life. The brain responds constantly to input, arriving from both the external world and internal experience. Sounds, movement, touch, memory, emotion, language, attention, learning, and repeated thought patterns all contribute to ongoing neural activity. The brain does not remain isolated from experience. It is continuously shaped by it. Consider how a person learning to play piano slowly develops smoother movement after many weeks or months of practice. At first, fingers may move awkwardly, while reading music requires intense concentration. Communication between sensory, motor, memory, and timing networks may feel uncertain and inefficient, but repeated practice encourages these systems to coordinate more effectively over time. Gradually, the movements become more fluid because activity strengthened and refined those neural pathways. The same principle appears throughout ordinary life. Repeated exercise influences movement-related networks, while studying information repeatedly can strengthen memory pathways. Even emotional habits may influence communication patterns if certain responses become consistently reinforced over long periods. This responsiveness helps explain why repetition matters so deeply in learning. A single brief experience may create only subtle neural influence. Repeated activation, however, encourages stronger and more stable communication patterns over time. The brain adapts most effectively when activity occurs consistently enough to reinforce particular pathways repeatedly. Activity shaping structure also helps explain why different individuals may develop different strengths and abilities across life. Neural systems adapt partly according to repeated experience. Someone spending years practicing movement, music, language, mathematics, navigation, or artistic skill may gradually strengthen different communication networks compared with someone following very different routines and environments. The brain therefore reflects patterns of living experience in subtle ways. Repeated use leaves traces within neural systems, much like frequently traveled roads become more defined over time. The structure of networks changes gradually according to how they are used. At the same time, the brain remains remarkably complex and balanced. Strengthening one pathway does not happen in isolation from the rest of the system. Many regions communicate together continuously, while competing demands for energy and activity influence how networks adapt. The brain operates more like an interconnected ecosystem than a collection of isolated circuits functioning independently. Attention also plays an important role in shaping activity. Experiences receiving stronger focus or emotional importance may encourage more coordinated neural activation compared with information barely noticed. This partly explains why deeply meaningful experiences sometimes remain vivid, while ordinary details fade more easily with time. Sleep becomes critically important during these processes because the brain continues working with patterns formed throughout the day. During sleep, neural systems remain active while information becomes organized, and communication pathways adjust gradually beneath awareness. Some connections strengthen while others weaken, according to patterns of use and importance. Even quiet daily routines influence neural activity over time. Familiar environments, repeated schedules, conversations, habits, and behaviors all contribute to ongoing communication within the nervous system. The brain remains responsive continuously, rather than changing only during dramatic moments of learning or challenge. Modern neuroscience revealed that the nervous system operates through ongoing adaptation rather than fixed permanence. Neural networks shift gently through repeated activity, while communication patterns reorganize according to experience. This adaptability allows the brain to remain flexible within changing environments across the lifespan. The relationship between activity and structure also helps explain why habits can feel powerful and automatic. Frequently repeated behaviors encourage repeated neural communication along the same pathways. Over time, those routes may become increasingly efficient because the brain adapted itself according to those patterns. Habits often represent deeply reinforced communication systems built gradually through repetition. This process works across both physical and mental activity. Practicing movement strengthens certain pathways, while repeated attention patterns or emotional responses may influence others. The brain responds broadly to how it is used throughout daily life. Even during moments of apparent stillness, neural systems remain active continuously. Beneath quiet awareness, billions of neurons exchange signals across vast communication networks, shaped gently by repeated activity. Tiny pathways strengthen, adjust, and reorganize over time, according to the patterns flowing through them each day. The brain's ability to respond to activity represents one of the foundations of neuroplasticity itself. Neural systems remain dynamic rather than frozen, adapting gradually through use, repetition, experience, rest, and environmental input. Structure evolves because activity leaves biological influence within these living networks. For many years, sleep was often misunderstood as a mostly inactive state, where the brain simply powered down to rest after waking activity. From the outside, a sleeping person appears still and disconnected from the surrounding world. Eyes remain closed, while movement slows and awareness fades gradually into darkness. Yet modern neuroscience revealed something more fascinating. During sleep, the brain remains deeply active, carrying out many processes that help support learning, memory, regulation, balance, and neural adaptation. One of the most important discoveries involving neuroplasticity is that sleep plays a major role in how the brain changes over time. The sleeping brain continues processing information gathered throughout the day, while communication patterns shift quietly beneath awareness. Experiences, sensations, emotions, movements, conversations, and learned information do not simply disappear when sleep begins. Neural systems continue working with those patterns long after waking awareness fades. Imagine a large library remaining open through the night, after visitors leave for the evening. During the day, books may have been removed from shelves, placed in different areas, stacked unevenly, or left open across tables. Quiet workers moving through the building overnight gradually reorganize materials, return misplaced items, sort information, and restore order before morning arrives again. In a similar way, the sleeping brain continues organizing and adjusting activity patterns formed during waking life. During sleep, activity throughout the brain changes significantly compared with waking states. Certain patterns slow, while others become highly coordinated across different regions. Communication between networks shifts according to changing biological conditions. Rather than remaining inactive, the brain enters carefully regulated states, supporting different forms of processing and maintenance. Experiences from the day may be revisited through patterns of neural activity occurring during sleep. Scientists observed that some neural systems active during learning tasks later display related activity during rest and sleep periods. This process appears connected to how the brain organizes and stabilizes certain forms of memory over time. The idea may sound almost unbelievable at first. While conscious awareness disappears into sleep, neural systems continue working quietly with traces of waking experience beneath awareness. The brain remains deeply occupied even while the body rests motionless in darkness. Sleep also helps maintain balance within neural networks. Throughout waking life, large amounts of information flow continuously through the nervous system. Sensory input, emotional response, movement, attention, memory, language, and thought all generate activity across countless communication pathways. Sleep provides an important opportunity for the brain to regulate and reorganize aspects of this activity. Some connections may strengthen gradually during sleep, while others weaken or fade slightly, depending upon patterns of use and importance. This balancing process helps maintain flexibility and efficiency within neural systems. Without ongoing adjustment, the brain could potentially become overwhelmed by uncontrolled activity and excessive reinforcement of every experience equally. The brain therefore does not treat all information the same way. Certain patterns become reinforced while others lose strength over time. Sleep appears to support this careful balancing process by allowing neural systems to reorganize activity according to biological priorities and repeated experience. Sleep-related neural activity also reflects the incredible coordination operating across the nervous system. Different brain regions communicate together through changing patterns, while chemical conditions shift across sleep cycles. Timing becomes important because different forms of activity may support different processes during various stages of sleep. Consider how different the mind feels after a night of deep, restful sleep compared with severe exhaustion after prolonged wakefulness. Memory, emotional balance, concentration, learning, and mental clarity often become noticeably affected by sleep quality. These experiences reflect how deeply connected sleep is to neural regulation and adaptation. Modern neuroscience increasingly demonstrated that sleep is not separate from learning and neuroplasticity. It is woven directly into those processes. Repeated experience during waking life interacts with patterns of neural activity continuing during sleep and rest. Adaptation depends not only upon activity itself, but also upon recovery and reorganization afterward. The relationship between waking activity and sleep resembles a long, ongoing cycle, rather than two entirely separate states. Experiences gathered during the day influence neural patterns later processed during sleep. In turn, those nighttime adjustments may affect learning, memory, and behavior during future waking hours. Even ordinary daily routines contribute to this cycle. Practicing movement, studying information, forming habits, navigating environments, or engaging emotionally with experiences all generate activity within neural systems. Sleep helps regulate and organize aspects of that activity quietly overnight. The brain's ability to change therefore depends partly upon periods of rest as well as periods of stimulation. Constant activity without recovery would not support healthy adaptation efficiently. Neural systems require balance between input, processing, regulation, and restoration. Researchers studying sleep often describe it as an active biological state, rather than a passive absence of consciousness. Neural systems remain highly organized during sleep, while different patterns emerge across changing stages throughout the night. The sleeping brain continues operating continuously, even while conscious experience fades into dreams or deep rest. This understanding changed how scientists viewed both sleep and learning itself. Adaptation does not occur only during moments of conscious effort and attention. Some of the brain's most important organizational processes continue quietly afterward during periods of sleep and recovery. Inside the sleeping brain, countless neural connections continue adjusting quietly throughout the night. Some pathways gradually strengthen, while others weaken over time, depending upon patterns of activity and use. This balancing process forms one of the most important foundations of neuroplasticity, because the brain cannot strengthen every connection equally forever. Neural systems must constantly refine themselves to remain efficient, flexible, and organized. Throughout waking life, large amounts of information move through the nervous system continuously. Conversations, sounds, movement, emotions, decisions, habits, and sensory experiences all create patterns of neural activity. Some of these patterns occur repeatedly, while others appear only briefly before disappearing. The brain responds differently, depending upon how frequently certain pathways are used and how strongly systems become activated. Connections receiving repeated activity often become reinforced gradually over time. Signals traveling along those routes may move more efficiently, while communication between neurons grows more stable through repeated use. Pathways associated with familiar skills, repeated habits, or important information can therefore strengthen slowly as activity continues occurring across those networks. At the same time, less active connections may weaken gradually if they receive little reinforcement. This weakening is not necessarily harmful. In many cases, it helps the brain maintain balance and avoid becoming overwhelmed by unnecessary activity. Neural systems operate more effectively when important pathways remain organized and efficient rather than equally crowded with every possible connection. Imagine a large network of hiking trails crossing through an enormous forest. Some routes become busy because travelers use them every day. The ground grows firmer, while obstacles are cleared naturally through repeated movement. Other trails receive very little activity and slowly become overgrown by grass, leaves, and branches. The landscape changes according to patterns of use. Neural pathways change in a similar way as communication patterns strengthen or weaken over time. This balancing process helps explain why repetition remains so important in learning. Practicing an activity repeatedly encourages signals to travel through certain pathways again and again. The brain responds by reinforcing those communication routes gradually over time. Repeated use helps stabilize networks connected to memory, skill, and habit formation. Consider how a person learning a second language may initially struggle to recall unfamiliar words or sentence patterns. During early learning, communication across those neural pathways may feel uncertain and slow, but repeated exposure and practice encourage stronger coordination between language-related networks. Over time, familiar phrases become easier to recognize and produce because repeated activity strengthens those systems gradually. The opposite process also occurs naturally. Information or skills receiving little reinforcement may fade gradually as pathways weaken through disuse. This is partly why forgotten memories or unused abilities can become more difficult to access after long periods without practice. Neural systems remain dynamic rather than permanently fixed. Sleep appears to support many aspects of this balancing process. During sleep, patterns of neural activity continue shifting, while the brain organizes information gathered throughout waking experience. Some pathways associated with repeated or meaningful activity may strengthen further, while less important activity patterns weaken gradually into the background. Scientists sometimes describe this process as helping the brain maintain efficiency. Constant strengthening of every connection would likely create overwhelming amounts of uncontrolled activity. By adjusting pathways selectively, neural systems remain flexible and organized while preserving important information more effectively. This refinement also influences how memories become stabilized. Frequently revisited information or repeated experience may encourage stronger neural coordination compared with brief unnoticed events that fade more easily. Repetition acts almost like reinforcement placed upon certain pathways, gradually increasing their stability within the network. At the same time, weakening unused pathways helps preserve resources and reduce unnecessary activity. The brain requires enormous energy to operate continuously. Maintaining every possible connection equally would likely become biologically inefficient. Selective strengthening and weakening help maintain balance within these vast communication systems. The process unfolds gradually rather than instantly. Neural adaptation typically occurs through countless small adjustments accumulating quietly over time. A single moment of practice or experience may leave only subtle influence, yet repeated activity across days, weeks, months, and years can reshape communication pathways significantly. This gradual change helps explain why habits can feel deeply rooted. Repeated behaviors encourage repeated neural activation along the same pathways over long periods. Those systems may eventually become highly efficient because the brain adapted itself according to familiar patterns of use. Even emotional responses may become reinforced through repetition. Patterns of attention, interpretation, and reaction influence neural activity continuously. The brain responds not only to physical movement and external learning, but also to recurring mental and emotional experience. Sleep provides important periods where these adjustments continue beneath awareness. While conscious thought fades, neural systems remain active, organizing communication patterns shaped throughout the day. Some pathways become stabilized, while others weaken gently through ongoing biological regulation. Modern neuroscience revealed that the brain functions less like a rigid machine, storing fixed information permanently, and more like a living network, continuously adjusting itself through use. Strengthening and weakening occur together as part of ongoing adaptation across the lifespan. This dynamic balance allows the nervous system to remain responsive within a changing environment. Important pathways strengthen, while unnecessary activity softens gradually into the background. Neural systems refine themselves constantly through ongoing communication between billions of neurons operating together. Deep inside the brain, communication between neurons depends upon the strength and efficiency of synaptic connections linking vast neural networks together. Some of these connections remain relatively weak and unstable, while others become highly efficient through repeated activity over long periods. One of the central processes involved in neuroplasticity is synaptic strengthening, the gradual reinforcement of communication pathways that receive repeated use. Through this process, the brain adapts itself continuously according to patterns of experience, learning, movement, memory, and attention. A synapse is a tiny communication point where one neuron exchanges signals with another. Although microscopic in size, synapses form the foundation for nearly every thought, sensation, movement, memory, and learned behavior. Signals passing repeatedly through certain synapses can gradually influence how effectively those neurons communicate together. Over time, pathways receiving frequent activity may become stronger and more reliable. Imagine a narrow dirt road connecting two villages across open countryside. At first, travel along the route may feel uneven and difficult, but if the road becomes heavily used every day, the surface gradually changes. Stones are cleared while the ground becomes smoother and more stable through repeated movement. Travel grows easier because constant use reshaped the pathway itself. Synaptic strengthening follows a similar pattern inside the brain. Repeated neural activity can gradually improve communication efficiency along frequently used routes. This strengthening process helps support learning and memory formation throughout life. Whenever certain patterns of activity occur repeatedly, neural systems may respond by reinforcing those pathways over time. Signals can travel more efficiently, while communication between neurons becomes more coordinated and stable. Repetition plays a major role because the brain responds strongly to patterns occurring again and again. A single brief experience may leave only subtle influence upon neural pathways. Repeated practice, however, encourages consistent activation of the same networks, increasing the likelihood that those connections will strengthen gradually over time. Consider how a person learning to type on a keyboard slowly improves with practice. During early attempts, movement may feel uncertain, while locating letters requires deliberate effort and concentration. Over time, repeated activity strengthens communication between visual, sensory, motor, and memory systems involved in the task. Eventually, the fingers move more automatically because the neural pathways supporting those movements became more efficient through repetition. This process occurs across many different forms of learning. Practicing music, studying language, navigating familiar places, repeating physical movement, and developing routines all involve repeated neural activation, capable of strengthening communication pathways gradually over time. Synaptic strengthening also helps explain why familiar activities often require less conscious effort after extensive practice. Tasks that once demanded intense concentration may eventually feel smooth and automatic because neural communication became more efficient along repeatedly used pathways. The brain refined those systems through ongoing repetition and activity. Memory itself depends heavily upon this strengthening process. Experiences associated with repeated use or strong significance may encourage more stable neural coordination compared with information receiving little reinforcement. Repeated activation helps preserve and stabilize certain patterns within neural networks. Sleep appears to play an important role in supporting synaptic strengthening as well. During sleep, neural systems remain active, while communication patterns shift and reorganize. Some pathways associated with repeated or meaningful activity may become reinforced further during these periods of rest and recovery. Scientists observed that activity patterns formed during waking experience sometimes reappear during sleep-related neural processing. This continued activation may help stabilize certain forms of memory and learning over time. The sleeping brain remains deeply involved in organizing and reinforcing communication pathways beneath awareness. The strengthening of synapses also reflects the broader adaptability of the brain itself. Neural systems are not permanently fixed structures operating identically throughout life. They remain responsive to activity, repetition, attention, and experience across changing environments and circumstances. At the same time, synaptic strengthening must remain balanced carefully with other forms of neural regulation. If every connection strengthened endlessly without control, the nervous system could become unstable and inefficient. The brain therefore continuously balances reinforcement with weakening and refinement processes that help maintain organized communication. This balance allows important pathways to become stable, while unnecessary activity gradually fades into the background. Neural systems remain dynamic and flexible rather than rigidly permanent. Even ordinary daily habits contribute to synaptic strengthening. Repeated routes traveled through a neighborhood, familiar routines followed each morning, regular conversations, practice skills, and recurring thought patterns all involve communication pathways shaped slowly through repetition. The brain responds not only to dramatic experiences, but also to small consistent patterns repeated across days and years. Familiar activity leaves traces within neural systems as communication pathways strengthen gradually through use. Modern neuroscience revealed that learning involves physical change within living networks rather than abstract information floating separately from biology. Thoughts, habits, movement, memory, and experience all depend upon communication between neurons adapting gradually over time. Synaptic strengthening therefore represents one of the core mechanisms allowing the brain to learn, adapt, and preserve information throughout life. Repeated activity shapes communication pathways, while neural systems refine themselves according to patterns of use and importance. As neural connections strengthen through repeated activity, the brain also begins refining how information travels across those pathways. Neuroplasticity is not only about creating stronger communication between neurons, it is also about improving efficiency, organization, coordination, and stability throughout vast neural networks operating continuously beneath awareness. The brain gradually adjusts itself so important pathways can function more smoothly, while communication becomes increasingly reliable over time. This refinement occurs quietly through ongoing patterns of use. Signals traveling repeatedly along familiar routes may encounter less resistance, while communication between regions becomes more coordinated. Neural systems adapt according to experience, repetition, attention, sleep, and activity, shaping the way information moves through the brain itself. Imagine a busy river flowing across a landscape over many years. At first, the water may spread unevenly across wide areas, while movement remains slow and disorganized. Gradually, the river carves deeper channels into the earth, creating smoother and more efficient flow. Water begins following clearer paths because repeated movements shape the environment itself. Neural pathways behave in a similar way. Repeated communication can gradually refine how signals travel through networks, allowing activity to move more efficiently along established routes. One reason this refinement matters so much is because the brain processes large amounts of information constantly. Sensory input, movement, language, memory, emotional response, and internal regulation all depend upon communication across billions of neurons exchanging signals continuously. Efficient organization helps these systems operate smoothly without becoming overwhelmed. As pathways strengthen and refine through use, communication may require less effort to produce familiar responses or behaviors. Activities once requiring intense concentration can eventually feel fluid and automatic because the brain improved coordination across the networks involved. Neural systems become more stable through repeated activation and ongoing adaptation. Consider how a person learning to drive a car often feels mentally exhausted during early lessons. Many different systems compete for attention simultaneously. Steering, braking, mirrors, traffic awareness, spatial judgment, movement coordination, and decision-making all demand active focus. But after long periods of practice, many of these actions become smoother and more automatic because repeated activity refined communication across the involved pathways. This refinement process does not mean the brain becomes rigid or incapable of change. Instead, neural systems remain flexible while improving efficiency in areas receiving frequent use. Familiar pathways strengthen while still remaining part of larger dynamic networks capable of further adaptation when needed. Memory formation also depends heavily upon refinement. Repeated exposure to information may encourage more stable and organized communication patterns over time. Signals associated with familiar knowledge can travel more effectively because the pathways supporting those memories became increasingly refined through repetition and reinforcement. The same principle applies to movement, language, emotional regulation, problem solving, and sensory interpretation. Neural systems adapt according to patterns of use, gradually improving coordination and efficiency across important networks. Sleep plays an important role during this process as well. During sleep, the brain continues organizing and adjusting activity patterns formed throughout waking life. Some pathways may strengthen further, while communication between regions becomes more coordinated through ongoing nighttime processing. Researchers studying sleep and memory observed that certain activity patterns associated with learning may reappear during sleep-related neural activity. These processes appear connected to how the brain stabilizes and refines communication pathways over time. Even during deep rest, neural systems remain occupied with organization and adaptation beneath awareness. The brain structure gradually reflects patterns of use accumulated across time. Frequently practiced skills may encourage stronger and more refined pathways, while rarely used systems may remain less organized or gradually weaken through inactivity. Neural networks continuously adapt themselves according to experience. This adaptability helps explain why experts in certain fields often perform complex tasks with remarkable fluidity. Years of repeated practice refine communication pathways extensively, allowing coordinated activity to occur more efficiently and automatically. The nervous system adapts itself slowly through countless repeated experiences. At the same time, refinement depends upon balance rather than simple strengthening alone. Neural systems must remain organized without becoming overloaded by excessive uncontrolled activity. The brain continuously regulates communication patterns, so important pathways remain stable, while unnecessary activity gradually fades into the background. Even small repeated routines contribute to this ongoing organization. Familiar walking routes, practice conversations, repeated emotional responses, language patterns, physical movement, and learned behaviors all involve pathways shaped gradually through use. The nervous system responds continuously to the patterns moving through it each day. Modern neuroscience revealed that the brain operates less like a static storage system and more like a living, adaptive network, constantly refining itself according to experience. Communication pathways strengthen, reorganize, and become more efficient through repeated activity, while sleep and rest help support those adjustments quietly beneath awareness. The refinement of neural pathways therefore represents one of the central ways neuroplasticity supports learning and adaptation throughout life. Repeated use shapes communication, while neural systems gradually improve efficiency and coordination across familiar networks. While some neural pathways strengthen through repeated activity and become more refined over time, the brain also carries out another equally important process that receives far less attention. Not every connection is preserved permanently. Some pathways gradually weaken and are reduced when they receive little activity or no longer contribute efficiently to communication within the nervous system. This process is known as synaptic pruning, and it plays a major role in helping the brain remain organized, flexible, and efficient throughout life. At first glance, the idea of reducing neural connections may sound negative or destructive, yet pruning is actually a normal and essential part of healthy neuroplasticity. The brain does not operate most effectively by keeping every possible pathway equally active forever. Instead, it constantly adjusts itself by strengthening useful communication patterns while reducing less active or unnecessary connections gradually over time. A useful comparison can be found in the care of a large garden or orchard. If every branch continued growing endlessly without regulation, plants could become crowded and disorganized, while sunlight and nutrients struggle to reach important areas efficiently. Careful pruning helps direct resources more effectively, supporting healthier growth and better balance throughout the system. Synaptic pruning functions in a similar way inside the brain. By reducing less active pathways, neural systems can maintain clearer and more efficient communication. Throughout waking life, the brain receives large amounts of sensory information and neural activity continuously. Every sight, sound, movement, emotion, conversation, and experience generates patterns of communication between neurons. Some pathways become reinforced through repeated use, while others receive only occasional or minimal activation. Over time, the brain gradually adjusts these systems according to patterns of activity and importance. Connections receiving little reinforcement may weaken slowly if they remain largely inactive. This does not happen instantly or dramatically. Neural change usually unfolds through gradual biological adjustments, accumulating quietly over long periods. Some synapses become less influential within communication networks, while more important pathways remain stable through continued use. One reason pruning matters so much is because the brain operates with limited energy and biological resources. Maintaining many highly active connections continuously would require tremendous amounts of metabolic support. By reducing unnecessary activity, the nervous system can allocate resources more efficiently toward pathways that remain most useful and important. This process also helps improve communication clarity within neural networks. If every possible signal remained equally active all the time, the brain could become overwhelmed by excessive noise and disorganized activity. Pruning helps refine systems so important pathways remain more coordinated and efficient. Consider how a person learning a skill gradually becomes more precise over time. During early learning stages, neural activity may spread broadly across many competing systems. Movements or thoughts can feel uncertain and inefficient. With repeated practice, important pathways strengthen, while less useful patterns fade gradually into the background. The nervous system becomes more organized through ongoing refinement. Sleep appears to support aspects of this balancing process as well. During sleep, neural systems remain active, while communication patterns continue shifting beneath awareness. Some pathways associated with repeated or meaningful activity may strengthen, while less active connections weaken gradually through ongoing regulation and organization. Researchers observed that sleep plays a role not only in strengthening important pathways, but also in maintaining healthy balance across neural systems. The sleeping brain continues refining activity patterns quietly throughout the night, while information gathered during waking life becomes reorganized and integrated. This balancing process begins very early in life. During development, the brain forms many neural connections, while experience gradually shapes which pathways remain most stable over time. Learning, environment, sensory input, movement, language, and social interaction all influence how these systems organize themselves. Yet pruning continues beyond childhood as well. Throughout life, neural systems remain dynamic and responsive to patterns of use. Frequently used pathways may strengthen, while less active systems gradually weaken according to changing experience and behavior. Pruning also helps preserve flexibility within the brain. By reducing unnecessary activity and maintaining efficient organization, neural systems remain capable of adapting to new experiences and learning throughout life. The brain continuously balances stability with change. At the same time, pruning does not erase all traces of past experience completely. Memories and learned behaviors, involve broad distributed networks throughout the brain. Neural adaptation unfolds through highly complex interactions rather than simple removal of isolated pieces. The nervous system operates more like a living ecosystem, continuously reorganizing itself through countless small adjustments. Modern neuroscience revealed that healthy brain function depends not only upon strengthening pathways, but also upon selective reduction and refinement. Efficiency emerges partly because the brain continuously adjusts communication according to patterns of activity and importance. Even ordinary daily routines contribute to this process. Repeated habits, familiar environments, practice skills, emotional patterns, and ongoing learning all influence which pathways remain active and stable over time. The brain responds continuously to how it is used. Inside the brain, balance is maintained through an extraordinary combination of strengthening, weakening, refinement, and regulation, occurring continuously beneath awareness. Neural systems do not simply grow larger and more active without limits. Instead, the brain carefully organizes communication pathways while conserving energy and biological resources wherever possible. This balance between activity and efficiency helps the nervous system remain stable, adaptable, and capable of supporting learning throughout life. Every moment of waking experience generates large amounts of neural activity. Sensory information enters continuously through sight, sound, touch, movement, internal sensation, memory, emotion, language, and attention. Billions of neurons exchange signals constantly, while networks coordinate many processes required for thought, behavior, and survival. Maintaining this activity requires tremendous biological organization. The brain itself consumes a surprisingly large amount of energy relative to its size. Although it represents only a small portion of total body weight, it requires continuous supplies of oxygen and nutrients to support ongoing communication between neurons. Signals moving across synapses, maintaining electrical balance, and regulating chemical activity all demand energy every second of every day. Because of this enormous demand, the brain cannot operate efficiently by maintaining every possible connection at maximum activity permanently. Neural systems must continuously organize themselves carefully, preserving important pathways while reducing unnecessary activity. Conservation becomes essential for maintaining balance within these vast communication networks. Imagine a large city managing electricity across millions of homes, roads, buildings, and transportation systems. Energy must be directed efficiently so essential areas remain supplied while waste and overload are minimized. If every system attempted to operate at maximum capacity continuously, instability and inefficiency could quickly develop. In a similar way, the brain carefully regulates activity across neural networks, so communication remains organized and sustainable. Synaptic pruning plays an important role in this conservation process because reducing less active pathways helps preserve resources for more important communication systems. Frequently used networks remain stable, while unnecessary activity softens gradually into the background. This selective organization allows the brain to function more efficiently. The result is not emptiness or reduction for its own sake. Instead, the nervous system becomes more refined and coordinated over time. Neural communication grows clearer while important pathways remain supported through repeated use and reinforcement. Consider how skilled movement often becomes more efficient after extensive practice. During early learning stages, many unnecessary motions and competing signals may appear across the nervous system. Over time, repeated practice refines communication pathways, so movement becomes smoother and less energetically demanding. The brain conserves effort by organizing activity more effectively. The same principle applies to memory, language, emotional regulation, sensory interpretation, and many ordinary daily functions. Neural systems adapt gradually according to patterns of use while balancing efficiency with flexibility. Sleep supports many aspects of this organization as well. During sleep, the brain continues regulating communication patterns formed throughout waking life. Some pathways strengthen, while others weaken gradually, according to activity and importance. Neural systems remain highly active even while conscious awareness fades into rest. Researchers observed that sleep appears connected to maintaining healthy balance across neural networks. Information gathered during the day becomes reorganized, while communication patterns adjust quietly beneath awareness. Sleep therefore contributes not only to restoration, but also to ongoing neural organization. Organization within the brain also reflects the strong coordination between different regions and networks. Memory systems communicate with emotional systems, while sensory pathways interact with movement-related regions and attention networks. The nervous system functions through cooperation across countless interconnected pathways rather than isolated independent parts. Without careful regulation, communication within these networks could become chaotic and unstable. The brain therefore continuously adjusts activity levels, strengthens useful pathways, reduces unnecessary connections, and preserves balance through ongoing biological control. This balancing process allows the nervous system to remain flexible rather than rigid. Stable organization supports efficient communication, while continued adaptability allows learning and adjustment across changing environments and experiences. The brain remains dynamic without losing overall coordination. Even simple routines contribute to this ongoing organization. Familiar environments, repeated behaviors, practice skills, emotional habits, and patterns of attention all influence neural communication systems gradually over time. The brain responds continuously to how it is used throughout daily life. Modern neuroscience revealed that efficient brain function depends not merely upon having more neural activity, but upon maintaining carefully regulated and organized communication across networks. Balance itself becomes one of the defining features of healthy neuroplasticity. This organization allows the brain to support memory, learning, adaptation, movement, language, emotion, and perception without becoming overwhelmed by uncontrolled activity. Neural systems refine themselves continuously, so communication remains coordinated and sustainable. At the same time, conservation does not mean inactivity. The brain remains highly active even during sleep and quiet rest. Signals continue moving through networks, while systems regulate themselves continuously beneath awareness. Biological maintenance and organization persist throughout life. The nervous system therefore operates less like a rigid machine and more like a living ecosystem, balancing many processes simultaneously. Strengthening, pruning, regulation, restoration, and adaptation all occur together through ongoing interaction between billions of neurons, exchanging signals continuously. Although sleep may appear calm and uniform from the outside, the brain actually moves through several distinct stages throughout the night, each involving different patterns of neural activity and biological regulation. These stages form repeating cycles that unfold continuously while the body rests. Brain activity changes gradually from one state to another as communication between neural systems shifts according to carefully coordinated internal processes. For many years, people often imagined sleep as a simple, inactive condition where awareness disappeared completely until morning arrived again. Modern neuroscience revealed something far more complex. The sleeping brain remains highly organized and active, moving rhythmically through changing states that support different forms of restoration, regulation, memory processing, and neural adaptation. One of the most noticeable differences between sleep stages involves the overall pace and pattern of neural activity. Some stages are associated with slower and more synchronized brain activity, while others involve faster and more varied communication across different networks. The nervous system does not remain static during sleep. Activity patterns shift continuously throughout the night. Imagine standing beside an ocean shoreline late at night while waves move steadily toward land. Some waves arrive slowly and gently, while others appear more active and layered with complex movement. The surface changes constantly, even though the overall rhythm remains organized and continuous. Sleep stages behave in a similar way. The brain cycles through different patterns of activity while maintaining coordinated structure across the night. Early stages of sleep often involve gradual slowing of activity compared with waking awareness. Breathing may become steadier while muscles relax and external attention fades. Neural communication patterns begin shifting away from the rapid sensory engagement common during waking life. As sleep deepens further, some stages involve slower and more synchronized patterns of neural activity spread across large regions of the brain. These slower rhythms are associated with important forms of restoration and regulation. Communication between neurons becomes highly coordinated in distinctive ways during these periods. At other times during the night, brain activity may become more complex and varied again. Certain stages involve patterns that appear surprisingly active despite the body remaining asleep. Neural systems continue exchanging large amounts of information beneath awareness, while communication between different regions shifts dynamically throughout these cycles. One reason sleep stages matter so much is because different forms of neural processing appear connected to different states across the night. Memory-related activity, restoration processes, regulation of communication pathways, and other biological functions may occur differently depending upon the stage of sleep involved. The brain therefore uses sleep as a highly organized sequence of changing conditions rather than one single uniform state. Timing and coordination become extremely important because neural systems rely upon these repeating cycles to maintain balance and support adaptation. Sleep cycles repeat multiple times throughout the night as the brain moves gradually between different stages. These repeating transitions allow neural systems to carry out a variety of processes supporting healthy function and regulation. The sleeping brain remains active continuously, even while conscious awareness fades into darkness. Researchers studying sleep often observe changing electrical activity patterns across the brain during different stages. Some patterns become slower and more synchronized, while others appear faster and more varied depending upon the state involved. These shifts reflect changing forms of communication between neural networks. The body also changes alongside these neural shifts. Heart rate, breathing patterns, muscle tension, body temperature regulation, and chemical signaling may vary across different stages of sleep. The nervous system coordinates these processes together through ongoing communication between many interconnected regions. Memory processing appears especially connected to certain sleep stages. Experiences gathered during waking life may undergo continued organization, while neural systems remain active beneath awareness. Different forms of learning and memory stabilization may rely upon the changing conditions present across these sleep cycles. At the same time, no single stage operates completely alone or independently. Sleep functions through the coordinated interaction of multiple states, repeating rhythmically throughout the night. The nervous system depends upon these cycles working together as part of larger biological regulation. The existence of distinct sleep stages also reveals how dynamic the brain remains, even during deep rest. Far from shutting down completely, neural systems continue shifting through changing forms of activity, while countless maintenance and organizational processes unfold continuously. Modern neuroscience revealed that healthy sleep involves not merely the amount of time spent asleep, but also the organization and structure of these stages throughout the night. The rhythm and coordination of sleep cycles help support restoration, adaptation, and neural balance over time. Even during the quietest moments of deep sleep, the brain remains highly active at levels hidden completely from ordinary awareness. Signals continue moving through networks, while communication patterns shift according to changing biological states. The sleeping brain therefore behaves less like a system powering down and more like a living environment, moving through carefully regulated cycles of activity and restoration. Different stages support different processes, while neural systems continue adapting and organizing themselves throughout the night. Throughout the night, as the brain moves through changing stages of sleep, neural systems continue processing information gathered during waking life. Experiences from the day do not simply vanish once conscious awareness fades into sleep. Instead, patterns of activity continue shifting quietly beneath awareness, while networks communicate, reorganize information, and stabilize certain forms of memory over time. Sleep therefore plays an important role in helping the brain connect temporary experience with longer-lasting neural organization. One of the most fascinating discoveries in modern neuroscience is that memory processing continues actively during sleep. The brain remains deeply occupied, even while the body rests motionless in darkness. Neural systems involved in learning, experience, and communication continue exchanging signals through carefully coordinated patterns throughout the night. Imagine a large workshop after daytime activity has ended. During the day, tools, materials, notes, and unfinished projects may have accumulated across many different rooms. Quiet workers moving through the building overnight begin sorting, organizing, repairing, and placing important materials into more stable arrangements before morning arrives again. In a similar way, the sleeping brain continues working with patterns formed during waking experience, gradually organizing information beneath awareness. Researchers studying neural activity discovered that some patterns associated with waking experience may later reappear during sleep. Activity linked to learning tasks, movement, navigation, or memory can sometimes become active again while the brain rests. These repeated patterns appear connected to how neural systems stabilize and reinforce certain forms of information over time. The brain, therefore, does not separate waking experience completely from sleep. Instead, activity continues flowing between these states as neural systems process information across ongoing cycles of wakefulness and rest. Learning depends not only upon what happens during active experience, but also upon what the brain does afterward during sleep. Memory itself involves highly distributed communication across networks rather than isolated storage in one single location. Different aspects of an experience may involve sensory systems, emotional processing, movement-related activity, language networks, attention systems, and association pathways communicating together. Sleep helps support the coordination and organization of these patterns over time. Some sleep stages appear especially important for certain forms of memory processing. During particular periods of neural activity, communication between regions becomes highly coordinated, while information may become reorganized and stabilized within larger networks. Timing and sleep structure therefore matter greatly, because different states support different forms of processing. Consider how unfamiliar information sometimes feels clearer or easier to recall after a full night of rest. During waking study or practice, neural systems become active, while patterns of communication form across networks involved in learning. Sleep may help strengthen and organize aspects of those pathways afterward, supporting more stable memory and improved efficiency. Most people never sense memories being organized during sleep directly. Yet beneath the surface of rest, billions of neurons continue exchanging signals, while communication patterns shift through carefully coordinated cycles. Neural activity during sleep also reflects extraordinary cooperation between different systems across the brain. Regions involved in memory, emotion, sensory processing, and regulation continue interacting through changing patterns throughout the night. Sleep allows these systems to communicate under conditions very different from waking awareness. At the same time, not every experience becomes preserved equally. The brain constantly balances strengthening, weakening, organization, and refinement across neural pathways. Some patterns become more stable, while others fade gradually, depending upon repetition, importance, emotional significance, and activity. This selective organization helps maintain efficiency within neural systems. Without some form of regulation, the brain could become overwhelmed by large amounts of constantly competing information. Sleep supports the careful balance between preservation and refinement required for healthy neuroplasticity. The role of timing becomes especially important during these processes. Sleep unfolds through coordinated cycles rather than one single unchanging state. Different stages involve different forms of neural activity, and those changing conditions influence how information is processed throughout the night. Researchers observed that healthy sleep structure appears closely connected to learning, memory stability, emotional balance, and cognitive function. Sleep is not merely passive rest following activity. It forms part of the larger biological process through which the brain adapts itself continuously over time. Even ordinary daily routines contribute to this ongoing organization. Conversations, familiar places, movement, reading, emotional experiences, learning, and repeated habits all generate patterns of activity later processed during sleep. The brain responds continuously to experience through ongoing cycles of activity and recovery. Modern neuroscience revealed that memory depends not only upon waking attention, but also upon the brain's ability to process and organize information afterward during periods of rest. Sleep supports this transition from temporary experience toward more stable neural structure. The sleeping brain therefore behaves less like a disconnected, inactive system and more like a living network, continuing to refine itself through carefully coordinated activity throughout the night. Neural communication persists continuously beneath awareness, while patterns formed during waking life become reorganized gradually over time. Beneath every thought, memory, sensation, and dream unfolding inside the brain, an immense system of chemical communication operates continuously between neurons. Electrical activity often receives most of the attention when people imagine how the nervous system works. Yet chemical signaling is equally important for allowing neural networks to coordinate themselves properly. Tiny molecular messengers move constantly between cells, helping regulate communication, activity levels, sleep cycles, memory processing, emotion, attention, and countless other biological functions throughout the brain. These chemical messengers are known as neurotransmitters. Neurons release them into synapses during communication with neighboring cells. After release, neurotransmitters influence how other neurons respond, helping signals continue, weaken, pause, or shift according to changing conditions within the nervous system. Imagine a vast orchestra preparing for a nighttime performance. Individual musicians may possess great skill independently, yet without coordination, the combined sound could quickly become chaotic. A conductor helps regulate timing, balance, rhythm, and transitions so the entire system operates together smoothly. Neurotransmitters function in a similar way throughout the brain. They help coordinate communication between neurons, so activity remains organized and balanced across enormous interconnected networks. Different neurotransmitters influence neural systems in different ways. Some encourage activity and alertness, while others support calming regulation and reduce stimulation. Certain chemical conditions become more common during waking states, while others shift gradually during sleep. The brain continuously adjusts these internal balances according to changing biological needs across the day and night. One of the most fascinating aspects of sleep is how dramatically these chemical conditions change as the brain moves through different stages. Levels of various neurotransmitters rise and fall across sleep cycles, influencing how neurons communicate and how networks coordinate activity beneath awareness. During waking life, the brain often maintains chemical conditions supporting attention, movement, sensory processing, and active interaction with the environment. As sleep approaches, many of these patterns begin shifting gradually. Neural systems transition toward different forms of coordination, while communication throughout the brain changes accordingly. These changes do not happen randomly. The nervous system carefully regulates neurotransmitter activity through highly organized biological control systems. Internal timing mechanisms, neural feedback loops, and interactions between different brain regions help coordinate these transitions continuously throughout the night. The behavior of neurons depends heavily upon these chemical conditions. Neurotransmitters influence how easily neurons become active, how strongly signals travel across synapses, and how networks coordinate communication across the nervous system. Tiny chemical shifts can therefore influence large-scale patterns of brain activity. This regulation becomes especially important during sleep because different forms of neural processing depend upon changing internal conditions. Memory organization, restoration, emotional regulation, and network coordination all occur within carefully balanced chemical environments, shifting gradually across the night. Imagine a large city changing character from day to night. During daylight hours, streets may remain busy with movement, conversation, transportation, and activity. As evening arrives, lighting changes while traffic patterns slow and quieter rhythms emerge throughout the environment. The city remains active, yet the conditions shaping activity become very different. The sleeping brain shifts in a similar way, as neurotransmitter levels guide neural communication into new states during the night. Sleep cycles therefore involve not only changing electrical activity, but also changing chemical regulation across the nervous system. Neural communication patterns depend upon these shifting internal environments operating continuously beneath awareness. Researchers discovered that healthy sleep depends partly upon maintaining proper balance between these chemical systems. Disruption of neurotransmitter regulation can influence sleep quality, emotional stability, attention, memory processing, and overall neural function. The brain relies upon careful coordination between countless interacting systems. At the same time, neurotransmitter activity remains deeply connected to neuroplasticity itself. Learning, repetition, emotional significance, attention, and memory all involve chemical signaling across synapses. The strengthening and weakening of pathways depend partly upon these molecular communication processes operating continuously between neurons. Even ordinary experiences influence chemical activity across the nervous system. Sensory input, stress, movement, learning, emotional states, social interaction, and environmental conditions all affect neural communication patterns in subtle ways. The brain remains highly responsive to both internal and external conditions. Sleep provides important periods where these systems continue regulating and reorganizing themselves. Chemical conditions shift while communication patterns change across different sleep stages. The sleeping brain remains highly active even while conscious awareness fades into rest. Modern neuroscience revealed that neural communication depends not only upon electrical signals moving between neurons, but also upon the chemical environment shaping how those signals behave. Neurotransmitters help guide timing, coordination, balance, and adaptation across the nervous system. This regulation allows the brain to remain flexible while preserving overall stability. Neural systems can adapt to experience, process memory, regulate emotion, and support sleep because communication remains carefully organized through ongoing chemical coordination. The nervous system behaves less like a simple electrical machine and more like a living biological ecosystem where many forms of signaling interact continuously. Electrical activity, chemical communication, sleep cycles, memory processing, and neural adaptation all operate together through ongoing coordination across billions of cells. Inside the brain, many systems operate together continuously to maintain balance and stability across enormous networks of neural activity. Every thought, movement, memory, sensation, emotional response, and sleep cycle depends upon carefully regulated communication between billions of neurons exchanging signals across the nervous system. Without ongoing regulation, neural activity could quickly become disorganized and unstable. The brain therefore relies upon highly coordinated biological systems that guide communication, preserve balance, and support healthy adaptation over time. One of the most remarkable features of the nervous system is that it remains active continuously throughout life. Even during deep sleep, quiet rest, or moments of stillness, neurons continue exchanging signals across intricate communication pathways beneath awareness. The brain never becomes completely inactive. Instead, it shifts through changing patterns of activity while maintaining overall coordination and stability. Imagine a large ecosystem deep within an ancient forest. Rivers flow while plants exchange nutrients. Animals move through changing environments, and weather patterns influence the entire landscape continuously. Despite constant movement and change, the ecosystem remains organized because many systems interact together in balanced ways. The brain behaves in a somewhat similar manner. Neural communication changes constantly while underlying regulatory systems help preserve order and stability across the whole network. Regulation within the brain occurs through many interacting processes operating simultaneously. Neurotransmitters influence communication between neurons, while sleep cycles alter patterns of activity throughout the night. Electrical signaling, chemical balance, energy regulation, sensory input, memory processing, and internal biological rhythms all interact continuously to shape neural function. This coordination becomes especially important because the nervous system must remain both stable and flexible at the same time. The brain needs enough stability to preserve memory, maintain identity, regulate movement, and support organized behavior. Yet it also requires enough flexibility to learn, adapt, respond to experience, and reorganize pathways through neuroplasticity. Maintaining this balance is one of the brain's greatest biological achievements. Too much rigidity could limit learning and adaptation, while too much instability could disrupt organized communication between neural systems. The nervous system therefore continuously adjusts itself to preserve coordination across changing conditions. Sleep plays a major role in supporting this regulation. During sleep, patterns of neural activity shift, while communication between regions reorganizes according to changing biological states. The brain continues carrying out maintenance, coordination, and balancing processes even while conscious awareness disappears into rest. Researchers observed that healthy sleep helps support emotional regulation, memory processing, learning, and neural balance, partly because sleep allows these ongoing regulatory systems to function properly. Sleep is not separate from brain maintenance. It forms part of the larger biological process through which neural systems preserve stability and adaptability together. Internal regulation also helps control how neurons respond to activity and stimulation. The brain constantly adjusts communication levels so networks remain responsive without becoming overwhelmed. Signals must remain organized enough to support efficient function across vast interconnected pathways. Consider how different the mind feels after severe exhaustion compared with periods of healthy rest and balance. Attention, emotional stability, memory, concentration, and decision-making may all become affected when neural regulation is disrupted through insufficient recovery. These experiences reflect how deeply coordination and balance influence brain function. At the same time, regulation does not mean complete stillness or lack of change. The brain remains dynamic continuously. Neural pathways strengthen, weaken, reorganize, and adapt through ongoing experience and activity. Stability emerges not from freezing the system permanently, but from carefully managing change itself. This balance between stability and adaptation appears throughout neuroplasticity. Frequently used pathways may strengthen, while less active connections weaken gradually. Sleep helps regulate communication patterns, while neurotransmitters coordinate activity across changing conditions. The nervous system continuously adjusts itself while preserving organized function. The brain's ability to regulate itself depends upon cooperation between many regions and systems, rather than one isolated control center operating alone. Sensory networks, memory systems, emotional pathways, sleep-related regions, and chemical signaling systems all interact continuously through overlapping communication patterns. Modern neuroscience revealed that healthy brain function depends not simply upon activity itself, but upon carefully regulated activity balanced across interconnected systems. Coordination becomes just as important as communication. Even ordinary daily routines influence this balance. Sleep patterns, repeated habits, movement, learning, emotional experiences, stress, environmental stimulation, and rest all affect neural regulation in subtle ways. The brain responds continuously to changing internal and external conditions. The nervous system behaves less like a machine carrying out isolated commands and more like a living adaptive environment, balancing many forms of communication simultaneously. Stability emerges through ongoing regulation rather than rigid permanence. Although the body appears quiet during sleep, the brain continues using significant amounts of energy throughout the night to support ongoing communication, regulation, maintenance, and neural organization. Sleep is not a state where the nervous system simply shuts down completely to conserve all activity. Instead, the brain remains deeply active beneath awareness, carrying out many biological processes that help preserve balance and support neuroplasticity over time. The human brain requires large amounts of energy compared with many other organs in the body. Even during waking rest, billions of neurons continue exchanging signals constantly while maintaining electrical balance, chemical communication, memory processing, sensory regulation, and countless internal functions. This activity demands continuous supplies of oxygen and nutrients every moment of life. During sleep, overall patterns of activity shift compared with waking awareness, yet the brain remains highly organized and metabolically active. Some systems become less externally focused, while others continue carrying out important forms of maintenance, coordination, and adaptation beneath awareness. Energy use changes rather than disappearing entirely. Imagine a large city late at night after most people have gone home and streets have grown quieter. Traffic slows while office lights fade across many buildings. Yet beneath the calmer surface, many systems continue operating continuously. Electrical grids remain active while maintenance crews repair infrastructure. Transportation systems continue moving supplies. Communication networks function steadily, and water systems flow throughout the city. Sleep resembles this kind of nighttime transition within the brain. External activity quiets, while important internal processes continue working steadily beneath the surface. One reason the sleeping brain continues using energy is because neural communication never fully stops. Neurons remain active while networks coordinate changing sleep stages, regulate breathing and body temperature, process memory-related activity, and maintain many biological functions throughout the night. The nervous system remains alive with organized communication even during deep rest. Researchers discovered that sleep supports many forms of maintenance within the brain itself. Some biological processes involved in clearing waste products appear especially active during sleep-related states. The nervous system continues regulating and supporting its own internal environment, while conscious awareness fades into rest. This idea may feel surprising because sleep often appears inactive from the outside. Yet modern neuroscience revealed that the brain remains deeply occupied throughout the night with forms of biological work hidden entirely beneath awareness. Sleep involves regulation and maintenance rather than simple shutdown. The brain also uses energy during sleep to support ongoing neuroplasticity. Neural systems continue adjusting communication pathways, while information gathered during waking life becomes organized and integrated into larger networks. Some connections strengthen, while others weaken gradually, according to patterns of use and importance. At the same time, sleep appears connected to forms of restoration, helping preserve healthy neural function over long periods. The nervous system depends upon these cycles of activity and recovery to maintain balance across countless interconnected systems. Different stages of sleep involve different forms of activity and energy use as well. Neural communication patterns shift across sleep cycles, while various systems become more or less active depending upon changing biological conditions. The sleeping brain remains dynamic rather than fixed in one unchanging state. Consider how profoundly sleep deprivation can affect memory, emotional balance, concentration, learning, and physical coordination after extended periods without adequate rest. These experiences reveal how important sleep-related regulation and maintenance truly are for healthy neural function. The brain therefore relies upon sleep, not only for recovery from waking activity, but also for preserving organized communication and stable regulation across neural systems. Activity and restoration work together rather than opposing one another. Researchers studying energy use in the brain increasingly observed that even apparently quiet states involve large amounts of hidden biological activity. Neural systems continue exchanging signals while maintaining electrical balance and supporting many forms of regulation throughout life. Even moments of deep unconscious sleep still involve coordinated communication between countless regions and systems throughout the brain. Signals continue moving through networks, while internal conditions shift according to ongoing biological regulation. Modern neuroscience revealed that the brain functions less like a machine switching completely on and off, and more like a living ecosystem, continuously adjusting activity levels according to changing needs and conditions. Sleep becomes part of this larger rhythm of regulation rather than simple inactivity. The relationship between energy use and neuroplasticity also highlights how physically active learning and memory truly are. Thoughts and experiences do not exist separately from biology. Neural adaptation requires real communication between cells supported by ongoing metabolic activity across the nervous system. Even ordinary daily experiences contribute to these nighttime processes. Movement, learning, emotion, conversation, attention, sensory input, and repeated habits all generate activity patterns later processed during sleep, while neural systems continue organizing themselves beneath awareness. The sleeping brain therefore remains highly active in ways most people never consciously perceive. Communication, regulation, maintenance, restoration, and adaptation continue unfolding quietly through intricate biological coordination across the night. Throughout the night, while conscious awareness fades into sleep, the brain continues carrying out many forms of restoration and internal maintenance that help preserve healthy neural function over time. The sleeping nervous system remains highly active beneath the surface, regulating communication, maintaining balance, supporting neuroplasticity, and caring for the biological environment required for billions of neurons to operate together effectively. For many years, people often imagined sleep mainly as a period of inactivity where the body simply rested from daytime effort. Modern neuroscience revealed something far more intricate. Sleep allows the brain to shift into carefully regulated states, supporting restoration, organization, repair, and long-term maintenance across vast neural networks operating continuously throughout life. Imagine a large ship traveling across the ocean for many weeks without ever stopping completely. Even during quieter nighttime hours, crews continue inspecting equipment, repairing worn systems, balancing supplies, and maintaining the vessel so it can continue functioning safely on the journey ahead. In a similar way, the brain continues carrying out maintenance and restoration during sleep, while the body rests quietly in darkness. One important aspect of restoration involves preserving stable communication between neurons. Neural systems exchange many signals every second during both waking life and sleep. Maintaining this activity requires constant biological support. The brain therefore depends upon ongoing regulation and internal maintenance to preserve efficient communication across its networks. Researchers discovered that sleep supports processes involved in clearing certain waste products from the brain's internal environment. During waking activity, metabolic processes generate byproducts that must be regulated and removed efficiently over time. Sleep appears connected to forms of nighttime maintenance, helping support this balance within neural tissue. This process reflects how physically active and biologically demanding neural communication truly is. Thoughts, memory, movement, emotion, learning, and sensation all depend upon living cells operating continuously through electrical and chemical signaling. The nervous system requires ongoing care and regulation to preserve healthy function across long periods of time. Sleep also supports restoration through its role in balancing neural activity itself. Throughout waking life, countless pathways become active through sensory input, emotional response, movement, memory, attention, and learning. During sleep, communication patterns shift, while neural systems reorganize and regulate themselves beneath awareness. Some pathways strengthen through continued processing, while others weaken gradually according to patterns of use and importance. This balancing process helps preserve flexibility and efficiency across neural networks while preventing overwhelming levels of uncontrolled activity. Different stages of sleep contribute differently to these processes as well. Neural activity patterns shift across changing sleep cycles, while communication between regions becomes organized according to varying biological conditions. Restoration therefore unfolds through carefully regulated rhythms rather than one single uniform state. The relationship between restoration and neuroplasticity is especially important because adaptation itself requires healthy regulation and maintenance. Neural pathways cannot strengthen, reorganize, and refine efficiently without stable biological support across the nervous system. Sleep helps provide the conditions allowing these processes to continue over time. Researchers studying sleep increasingly observed that insufficient rest can affect memory, emotional balance, concentration, learning, attention, and overall neural coordination. These effects reveal how deeply connected restoration is to healthy brain function. At the same time, restoration does not mean the brain becomes inactive or disconnected completely. The sleeping nervous system remains alive with communication and organization throughout the night. Signals continue moving across pathways, while biological systems regulate many forms of internal activity beneath awareness. Even ordinary daily experience influences the restorative work occurring overnight. Movement, learning, emotional response, conversation, sensory stimulation, and repeated habits all shape patterns of neural activity later processed during sleep. The brain responds continuously to experience through ongoing cycles of activity and recovery. Modern neuroscience revealed that healthy brain function depends not only upon stimulation and learning, but also upon periods of organized restoration, supporting neural balance over time. Sleep becomes part of the larger rhythm through which the nervous system maintains itself continuously. The brain behaves less like a machine requiring occasional shutdown and more like a living, adaptive ecosystem, constantly regulating and preserving itself through changing conditions. Restoration emerges through coordinated activity rather than complete inactivity. This understanding changed how scientists viewed sleep itself. Sleep is not merely the absence of waking consciousness, it is an active biological condition supporting regulation, repair, communication, memory processing, and long-term neural stability across billions of interconnected cells. Every experience a person encounters leaves some influence upon activity within the brain. Conversations, movement, emotions, environments, habits, learning, attention, and repeated behaviors all generate patterns of neural communication that gradually shape networks over time. The brain is not separated from experience, like a machine observing the world from a distance. It responds continuously to the patterns moving through it each day, adapting itself quietly through the ongoing process of neuroplasticity. This relationship between experience and neural organization forms one of the central ideas in modern neuroscience. The living structure of the brain changes gradually according to activity, repetition, sleep, and environmental input. Networks strengthen, weaken, reorganize, and refine themselves continuously, while billions of neurons exchange signals across vast communication systems beneath awareness. Imagine a coastline shaped slowly by years of wind and water. No single wave completely transforms the landscape at once, yet countless repeated movements gradually alter the shoreline over long periods of time. Sand shifts while rock edges soften and channels form according to repeated patterns of movement. Experience shapes neural networks in a similar way. Small moments repeated consistently can gradually influence communication pathways throughout the brain. This process begins very early in life. Sensory input, language exposure, movement, emotional interaction, and environmental stimulation all contribute to shaping communication patterns between neurons. Neural systems respond continuously to the conditions surrounding them. Yet this adaptability does not end during childhood. Throughout life, experience continues influencing neural organization in subtle and ongoing ways. Repeated practice strengthens pathways, while changing environments encourage adaptation across networks involved in learning, memory, movement, and emotional regulation. Consider how a person moving to a new city may initially feel disoriented while navigating unfamiliar streets and routines. Attention becomes highly active because neural systems must process new spatial information continuously. Over time, repeated exposure gradually strengthens pathways associated with navigation and familiarity. Routes that once required intense concentration may eventually feel automatic because the brain adapted itself through experience and repetition. The same principle applies across many ordinary activities. Learning a musical instrument, practicing movement, studying language, developing routines, forming habits, or repeating emotional responses all influence communication patterns gradually over time. The brain continuously reflects how it is used. Sleep plays an important role in this relationship between experience and adaptation. Activity patterns formed during waking life continue being processed during sleep, while neural systems reorganize information beneath awareness. Some pathways strengthen, while others weaken gradually according to repetition and importance. The nervous system also responds not only to physical activity, but to patterns of attention and emotional experience. Frequently repeated thoughts, emotional habits, and behavioral routines may influence neural communication over time through repeated activation of certain pathways. This adaptability helps explain why repeated experiences can gradually feel more familiar and automatic. Neural systems become more efficient through ongoing use, while communication pathways stabilize through repetition and reinforcement. At the same time, the brain remains flexible enough to adapt to changing circumstances throughout life. Neural organization is dynamic rather than permanently fixed. New experiences continue influencing communication patterns, while old pathways may weaken gradually through reduced use. Researchers increasingly revealed that the brain functions less like a static archive, storing permanent information unchanged forever, and more like a living network continuously reshaped by experience itself. Activity leaves traces within neural systems through ongoing biological adaptation. Even small daily routines matter within this larger process. Familiar conversations, repeated movement, regular sleep schedules, emotional patterns, reading habits, environments, and sensory experiences all generate activity, influencing communication pathways gradually through repetition. The brain therefore reflects life experience not only psychologically, but biologically as well. Neural networks adapt continuously according to patterns of activity, moving through them across days, months, and years. This understanding transformed how scientists viewed learning and adaptation. Experience itself became recognized as something capable of influencing physical communication patterns within the nervous system rather than existing separately from biology. Modern neuroscience revealed that neuroplasticity depends upon continuous interaction between the brain and the surrounding world. Neural systems respond to activity, while sleep supports organization and refinement afterward. Learning emerges through ongoing cycles of experience, communication, regulation, and rest. The nervous system behaves less like a rigid machine, following permanent instructions, and more like a living adaptive environment, continuously reshaping itself through contact with daily life. Stability and change operate together throughout these vast interconnected networks. The human brain is not a finished structure permanently locked into one fixed arrangement. Instead, it behaves more like a living system that continues adapting, reorganizing, and evolving throughout life in response to experience, activity, sleep, learning, and changing environments. Neural networks remain flexible beneath awareness, while billions of neurons exchange signals continuously across communication pathways, shaped gradually over time. This flexibility forms one of the most extraordinary characteristics of neuroplasticity. The brain preserves enough stability to maintain memory, identity, movement, language, and coordinated behavior, while also remaining adaptable enough to respond to new experiences and changing conditions. Stability and flexibility exist together within the nervous system rather than opposing one another. Imagine a great tree growing across many decades beside a riverbank. Its roots deepen while branches spread gradually toward changing sunlight and weather conditions. Some limbs strengthen while others fade over time. The tree remains recognizably the same living organism year after year, yet its structure continues adapting slowly to the environment surrounding it. The brain behaves in a similar way. Neural systems preserve continuity while continuously adjusting themselves through ongoing experience and activity. This ongoing adaptation allows people to continue learning throughout life. New experiences can still influence communication pathways, while repeated practice strengthens networks gradually over time. The nervous system remains responsive rather than permanently frozen after childhood development ends. Researchers studying neuroplasticity increasingly discovered that flexibility exists across many different forms of neural function. Communication pathways involved in movement, memory, attention, language, emotional regulation, and sensory interpretation can all adapt according to patterns of activity and use. At the same time, this flexibility unfolds gradually rather than instantly. Neural systems usually change through countless small adjustments, accumulating quietly over long periods. Repeated activity, attention, sleep, and experience influence communication pathways little by little, while the brain continues reorganizing itself beneath awareness. Sleep remains deeply connected to this ongoing adaptation because the sleeping brain continues regulating and organizing neural activity throughout the night. Patterns formed during waking life may strengthen, weaken, or reorganize during sleep-related processing, while communication between regions shifts through changing sleep stages. The relationship between waking experience and nighttime organization creates a continuous cycle of adaptation. Daily life generates patterns of activity, while sleep helps regulate, refine, and stabilize aspects of those patterns afterward. Neuroplasticity therefore depends upon both activity and recovery working together across time. Flexibility within neural systems also helps support resilience during changing circumstances. The ability to adapt allows the brain to respond to unfamiliar environments, new learning, repeated practice, and evolving patterns of experience throughout life. Consider how people gradually adjust to major changes in routine over time. At first, unfamiliar environments or behaviors may require intense attention and conscious effort, yet repeated exposure encourages neural systems to reorganize and adapt gradually until new patterns begin feeling more familiar and automatic. This adaptability reflects the remarkable balance maintained across the nervous system. The brain remains organized enough to preserve continuity while still flexible enough to support learning and change across the lifespan. Research has increasingly revealed that even ordinary daily experiences contribute to this ongoing evolution of neural networks. Sleep patterns, movement, learning, emotional habits, sensory stimulation, language exposure, and repeated routines all shape communication pathways gradually over time. The nervous system therefore reflects not only inherited biological structure, but also the accumulated influence of lived experience. Every repeated pattern leaves some subtle trace within neural communication systems operating continuously beneath awareness. Modern neuroscience increasingly moved away from viewing the brain as a rigid mechanical system incapable of major adaptation after early development. Instead, researchers revealed a far more dynamic picture involving continuous organization, refinement, and flexibility across neural networks. This understanding transformed how scientists viewed learning itself. Experience no longer appeared separate from biology. Activity physically influences communication pathways across the nervous system, while sleep supports organization and regulation afterward. The brain behaves less like a completed machine and more like a living, adaptive environment constantly responding to changing conditions. Communication pathways strengthen, weaken, refine, and reorganize through ongoing interaction between experience and neural activity. Even during quiet sleep, this process continues beneath awareness. Signals move across networks, while communication patterns shift according to biological rhythms, memory processing, chemical regulation, and repeated activity gathered throughout waking life. The flexibility of the nervous system ultimately allows people to continue adapting across changing environments and experiences throughout life. Neural networks remain dynamic while preserving enough stability to support organized thought, memory, movement, and identity over time. Over the course of a lifetime, the brain quietly records the influence of daily experience through gradual changes unfolding across vast neural networks. Every repeated movement, familiar conversation, emotional response, learned skill, environment, habit, and pattern of attention contributes in small ways to the ongoing organization of communication pathways across the nervous system. These changes rarely happen suddenly. Instead, long-term neural structure emerges through many ordinary moments woven together across time. One of the most fascinating aspects of neuroplasticity is that small repeated experiences can eventually produce meaningful long-term effects within the brain. A single moment may leave only subtle influence upon neural activity, yet repeated patterns occurring day after day can gradually strengthen communication pathways and shape larger systems over months and years. Imagine rain falling gently across a wide landscape year after year. One brief rainfall may leave little lasting effect, yet continuous repetition slowly shapes soil, riverbanks, and valleys across enormous stretches of time. Tiny movements accumulate gradually until the landscape itself reflects those repeated patterns. Daily experience influences neural systems in a similar way. Small moments repeated consistently can slowly shape communication pathways throughout the brain. This process helps explain why routines and habits often become deeply familiar and automatic over time. Repeated activity encourages repeated neural communication along the same pathways. The brain responds by strengthening and refining those routes gradually through continued use. At the same time, pathways receiving little activity may weaken slowly through disuse. Strengthening and pruning therefore operate together continuously throughout life, helping the brain remain both organized and adaptable. Neural systems constantly balance preservation with refinement. Long-term structure within the brain reflects this ongoing balance between repetition and regulation. Frequently used networks may become highly stable, while less active systems fade gradually into the background. The nervous system continuously reshapes itself according to patterns of experience and activity. Sleep remains deeply connected to these processes because nighttime regulation helps support organization and stabilization of neural communication pathways. Experiences gathered during waking life continue influencing activity patterns during sleep, while neural systems reorganize themselves beneath awareness. The relationship between daily activity and long-term neural structure therefore unfolds through ongoing cycles, repeated continuously throughout life. Waking experience generates activity, while sleep supports regulation, organization, and refinement afterward. Consider how a person practicing a physical skill across many years may eventually perform movements with extraordinary fluidity and precision. Those abilities emerge not from one isolated moment of learning, but from countless repetitions, gradually shaping communication pathways across the nervous system over long periods of time. The same principle applies to language, memory, emotional habits, navigation, reading, musical practice, attention patterns, and social interaction. The brain responds continuously to repeated activity, while communication networks adapt gradually according to use. Researchers increasingly revealed that long-term neural organization depends not only upon genetics or early development, but also upon repeated experience throughout life. The brain remains responsive to activity and environmental input across changing circumstances and stages of life. At the same time, adaptation does not mean identity disappears into constant instability. Neural systems preserve continuity while remaining flexible enough to support learning and change. The brain balances stability and adaptation together through ongoing regulation. Modern neuroscience increasingly moved away from viewing the brain as a rigid, permanent structure incapable of major change after development. Instead, researchers revealed a living, adaptive network shaped continuously through experience, repetition, sleep, regulation, and environmental interaction. This understanding transformed how scientists viewed memory and learning themselves. Experience physically influences communication pathways across the nervous system, while long-term repetition helps stabilize certain networks gradually over time. The brain behaves less like a fixed archive storing information permanently unchanged, and more like a living landscape continuously shaped by activity and experience. Neural systems reorganize gently while preserving enough stability to support memory, movement, language, and identity across the lifespan. Even ordinary daily patterns contribute to this ongoing reshaping. Sleep schedules, repeated emotional responses, familiar environments, movement routines, learning habits, conversations, and sensory experiences all influence neural communication gradually through continued repetition. The nervous system remains active continuously beneath awareness, while pathways strengthen, weaken, refine, and reorganize according to patterns of use and importance. Long-term structure emerges through countless small adjustments, unfolding quietly across years of experience. Throughout every moment of life, the human brain remains engaged in one of the quietest and most remarkable processes found anywhere in the natural world. Beneath awareness, billions of neurons exchange signals continuously, while communication pathways strengthen, weaken, reorganize, and refine themselves through experience, repetition, sleep, emotion, learning, and time. The living structure of the mind never becomes completely frozen or motionless. Instead, it continues adapting gently throughout life, through the ongoing process of neuroplasticity. From the earliest days of development, the brain responds continuously to the world surrounding it. Sensory input, movement, language, emotional experience, attention, habits, environments, and repeated behavior all contribute to shaping neural communication pathways gradually over time. Tiny adjustments unfold quietly beneath awareness, while daily life continues normally on the surface. One of the most fascinating aspects of neuroplasticity is how gradual and patient these changes often are. The nervous system usually does not transform through dramatic sudden shifts. Instead, countless small moments accumulate slowly across days, months, and years, while communication pathways adapt through repeated activity and ongoing experience. Imagine a mountain landscape changing across enormous stretches of time. Wind moves across stone, while rivers carve valleys gradually through the earth. Trees grow slowly towards sunlight, while seasons repeat year after year. No single moment completely reshapes the landscape at once, yet continuous gentle change eventually transforms the entire environment over long periods of time. The brain behaves in a similar way. Repeated patterns of activity slowly shape communication pathways, while the nervous system adapts itself quietly through countless small adjustments. Sleep remains deeply connected to this process because the sleeping brain continues regulating, organizing, and refining neural activity throughout the night. Communication patterns shift through changing sleep stages, while memory-related activity, restoration, and network coordination continue beneath awareness. The relationship between waking experience and nighttime organization forms an ongoing cycle repeating continuously throughout life. Daily activity generates patterns within neural systems, while sleep helps regulate and stabilize aspects of those patterns afterward. Neuroplasticity therefore depends upon both activity and recovery, working together through time. Researchers increasingly revealed that the brain behaves less like a rigid machine following permanent instructions and more like a living adaptive ecosystem responding continuously to changing conditions. Communication pathways strengthen through repetition, while less active systems weaken gradually through disuse. Neural networks refine themselves according to patterns of activity and importance over time. This adaptability allows people to continue learning throughout life. New experiences, environments, skills, and habits can still influence communication pathways, while sleep and regulation help support ongoing organization beneath awareness. The nervous system remains flexible while preserving continuity across memory, identity, movement, and thought. At the same time, neuroplasticity also reveals how deeply connected experience and biology truly are. Thoughts, emotions, habits, attention, learning, and repeated behavior are not separate from the physical structure of the brain. They emerge from communication within living networks, continuously adapting through use and activity. Modern neuroscience transformed understanding of the brain by revealing how dynamic and responsive neural systems truly are. Earlier generations often imagined the adult brain as relatively fixed after development finished. Researchers instead uncovered a nervous system capable of ongoing change throughout life, through repetition, experience, sleep, and learning. This understanding changed how scientists viewed memory, learning, emotion, and human behavior itself. The brain no longer appeared as a static storage system, but as a living adaptive network, constantly responding to activity and experience. Even ordinary daily moments contribute to this ongoing process. Familiar conversations, repeated routines, emotional habits, movement, reading, sensory stimulation, environments, and sleep patterns all influence communication pathways gradually over time. The nervous system reflects life experience through continuous adaptation, unfolding quietly beneath awareness. The balance between stability and flexibility remains one of the brain's greatest achievements. Neural systems preserve organized communication while remaining adaptable enough to support learning and change across the lifespan. Strengthening, pruning, restoration, regulation, and refinement all work together continuously throughout these vast, interconnected networks. The sleeping brain therefore remains far more active and dynamic than it first appears from the outside. Signals continue moving through billions of neurons, while communication pathways adjust gently according to patterns shaped across waking life. Memory, restoration, emotional balance, and neural organization continue unfolding silently through the night. Thank you for listening to the Sleepy Mind channel. I hope you enjoyed learning about neuroplasticity and the quiet hidden processes shaping the living brain every day and night.